1618, a war so devastating that entire regions of Europe lost half their population. Villages wiped off the map. Cannibalism reported in besieged cities. And a conflict that started, believe it or not, because two men were thrown out of a window. This is the 30 Years' War, one of the most destructive conflicts in European history, a war that killed an estimated 8 million people and left Central Europe in ruins for generations. What began as a religious dispute in a small corner of the continent eventually pulled in nearly every major power in Europe, turning into a brutal, sprawling nightmare that lasted 3 long decades. Before we get into it, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and drop a like if you want more deep dives into history that shaped our modern world. And I genuinely want to know, where in the world are you watching this from tonight? Drop your country in the comments. I read every single one. Let's rewind to 1618, to a single, strange incident in Prague that somehow set all of Europe on fire. To understand this war, you first need to understand the religious tensions gripping Europe in the early 1600s. Nearly a century earlier, the Protestant Reformation had shattered the religious unity of Western Christianity, dividing much of Europe between Catholic and Protestant states, often bitterly hostile toward one another. In the Holy Roman Empire, a sprawling patchwork of hundreds of German-speaking states loosely united under an emperor, this tension was especially dangerous. The Catholic Habsburg monarchy ruled the empire, but many of its territories, including Bohemia, had large and increasingly assertive Protestant populations. In May 1618, Protestant nobles in Prague, furious over the Catholic emperor's attempts to restrict their religious freedoms, stormed a royal castle and confronted several Catholic officials. In a moment of pure symbolic rage, the nobles literally threw 2 of these officials, along with a secretary, out of a high castle window. Remarkably, all 3 men survived the fall, allegedly landing in a pile of manure, though Catholic accounts at the time insisted angels had saved them, while Protestants simply laughed it off as luck. This bizarre event, known as the Defenestration of Prague, became the spark that ignited a religious rebellion in Bohemia, and within months, that rebellion exploded into a war that would eventually consume the entire European continent. What started as a localized Bohemian revolt against Habsburg rule quickly escalated. The Protestant Bohemian nobles deposed their Catholic king and elected a new Protestant ruler in his place. The Habsburg emperor, unwilling to accept this humiliation, sent Catholic imperial armies to crush the rebellion by force. In 1620, at the Battle of White Mountain near Prague, Catholic forces decisively crushed the Bohemian rebels, executing many of the rebellion's leaders and brutally suppressing Protestantism throughout Bohemia. It looked for a moment like the conflict might end quickly. Instead, it exploded outward. Other Protestant powers across Europe, fearing the growing strength of Catholic Habsburg influence, began intervening militarily. Denmark entered the war in 1625 to support Protestant forces, only to be decisively defeated within a few years. Then Sweden, under its brilliant and aggressive King Gustavus Adolphus, entered the conflict in 1630, turning the tide dramatically back in favor of Protestant forces across northern Germany. Eventually, even Catholic France, more concerned with weakening its Habsburg rivals than with religious solidarity, entered the war on the Protestant side in 1635, transforming the conflict from a religious struggle into a brutal, cynical contest for raw political power across the entire continent. If this twist is surprising you already, make sure to smash that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach more curious minds around the world. As the war dragged on for decades, the German-speaking lands at the heart of the Holy Roman Empire suffered catastrophic devastation. Massive mercenary armies, often unpaid and poorly disciplined, roamed the countryside, looting villages, burning farmland, and committing horrific atrocities against civilian populations who had no real stake in the distant political disputes tearing their homeland apart. Entire regions of Germany lost between 30 and 60% of their population due to violence, famine, and disease unleashed by the constant marching and pillaging of these massive armies. Some historians estimate that certain German territories took over a century to fully recover their pre-war population levels. Famine spread relentlessly as farmland was destroyed, and trade routes collapsed under the chaos of constant warfare. Disease, particularly plague and typhus, tore through weakened, starving populations, already devastated by military atrocities. Reports from besieged cities describe unimaginable horrors, including documented cases of desperate civilians resorting to cannibalism just to survive the ongoing sieges and blockades. Soldiers on all sides committed horrific war crimes against civilians, viewing looting and pillaging almost as a normal part of their unofficial wages, since many armies went unpaid for months at a time by their financially exhausted governments back home. Throughout the war, several massive and brutal battles reshaped the balance of power across the continent. The Battle of Breitenfeld in 1631 saw Swedish forces under Gustavus Adolphus deliver a crushing defeat to Catholic Imperial armies, proving that Protestant forces could indeed stand toe-to-toe with the seemingly unstoppable Habsburg military machine. Gustavus Adolphus himself was killed in battle in 1632 at Lützen, a devastating loss for the Protestant cause, though his forces still managed to claim victory that day. His death, however, robbed the Protestant alliance of perhaps its most brilliant and charismatic military leader at a critical moment in the conflict. The war also saw the rise and fall of legendary military commanders like Albrecht von Wallenstein, a brilliant but deeply ambitious Catholic general who amassed such enormous personal power and wealth that the emperor himself eventually grew suspicious and had Wallenstein assassinated in 1634, fearing he might betray the empire entirely. As the decades dragged on, both sides grew utterly exhausted, financially ruined, and desperate for any resolution. Yet the complex web of alliances and rivalries made peace agonizingly difficult to achieve, prolonging the suffering of ordinary civilians caught helplessly in the middle for years longer than necessary. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video if you're learning something new today. It truly helps this channel keep sharing these forgotten stories. By the mid-1640s, exhaustion finally forced the warring powers to the negotiating table. Diplomats from across Europe gathered in the German region of Westphalia, engaging in years of complex, painstaking negotiations to untangle the countless overlapping conflicts and territorial disputes that had accumulated over 3 decades of brutal warfare. Finally, in 1648, the Peace of Westphalia was signed, formally ending the 30 Years' War. This landmark peace treaty fundamentally reshaped the political map of Europe, establishing the modern concept of state sovereignty, meaning that rulers within their own borders would have authority over religious and political matters without constant outside interference from foreign powers or the Holy Roman Emperor. The treaty also granted greater religious tolerance across many German territories, allowing rulers and their populations somewhat more freedom in choosing between Catholicism, Lutheranism, and Calvinism, without automatically triggering foreign military intervention. The Holy Roman Empire itself survived the war, but its authority was permanently weakened, with individual German states gaining significantly greater autonomy and independence from centralized imperial control. Meanwhile, France and Sweden emerged from the war as significantly stronger continental powers, having successfully weakened their Habsburg rivals through decades of costly but ultimately strategic warfare. The negotiations at Westphalia were also historically significant, simply for how they were conducted. Representatives from dozens of different states, both large and small, sat together for years working out a complex, multilateral settlement, a diplomatic approach that many historians point to as the birth of modern international diplomacy itself. Never before had so many European powers negotiated a single, comprehensive peace, covering such an enormous range of overlapping territorial, religious, and political disputes all at once. The 30 Years' War remains one of the deadliest conflicts in European history, killing an estimated 8 million people through combat, famine, and disease across its brutal 30-year span. It fundamentally reshaped the political and religious landscape of an entire continent, establishing principles of state sovereignty that still influence international relations even today. The sheer scale of devastation inflicted upon ordinary German civilians serves as a haunting reminder of how quickly a localized political dispute can spiral into a continent-spanning catastrophe when powerful nations become entangled in overlapping alliances and rivalries. If you learned something today, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and follow this channel for more forgotten history from around the world. And once again, let me know in the comments, what country are you watching this from tonight? I love seeing how far these stories reach across the globe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.